Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our Law and Pop Culture podcast, where we talk about movies, TV shows, and pop culture's portrayal of legal matters, discussing what they got right, what they got wrong, and if law really happens that way. My name is Christine Karen-Zahagursky.
And I am Christine Mattis. So the theme for this episode are holographic wills. I'm excited to do that. But how are you doing, Chris? How was your weekend?
I'm good, thank you. I was just, we had COVID in the house, so we just kind of stuck around in the house. Nothing so crazy.
But you would think by this time we become more also creative or just comfortable doing nothing. I don't know.
I love being able to be in the house and say I couldn't go out, because for once I was like, oh, look, let me clean. Let me do this. It's one of those kind of
paradise. That's what I'm thinking too, right? I mean, the whole idea, you want to go here? You want to meet here?
Oh, I can't because I'm stuck. That was my weekend. So I think it was really good to just sit back, and I got a chance to watch the movie, and I was really excited about it because I was like, oh, it's like what playing Clue.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. And actually, I was able to watch it after we had a family get together, which I know you were supposed to come to, and it was with the kids. And again, I guess I'm out of practice of hosting, and it was all outside. Thankfully, it was all outside. So really, I love outside stuff because I don't have to clean up as much you would think. But no, we still have to clean up. I was exhausted. Like Sunday, I was in my pajamas all day. I kept thinking, why? I felt beat. I'm like, what happened? I mean, I really, it was just, I guess, not used to having people over and hosting and things like that. I was so tired, but that was the perfect rainy day yesterday to watch the movie. So I was excited. So yeah. And it just fell into place because, again, like I said, this theme for this episode is holographic wills. And that's the official term for wills that are written by hand, literally. And these type of wills, they're only valid in some states, and New Jersey included, but there's a lot of process and procedure in order to make it valid. It's not as simple as we think, as it probably would be said, to be heard. Basically it has to be written. It has to be, there's like a procedure, it has to be signed, has to be dated. You have to have it notarized. You have to have witnesses, and those are very critical to making it effective. And again, has to be presented in court, superior court, through a procedure we call an order to show cause. But anyway, you have to make a formal presentation in order for it to be probated, to be recognized. And because of all those processes, it makes it very interesting to see what will happen if this handwritten document can pass muster. So I am very excited to talk about that today. So I think it'll be a good topic to educate everyone, shed some light about it, in light of some entertainment of things that we've seen.
Right? Oh, that was very interesting. Absolutely. So going back to what you said about holographic wills, Chris, it's a challenge here in New Jersey to present to the court a holographic will. And here's why we don't recommend it. There's, like you said, there are all these different additional procedures. But let's talk about how this movie kind of brings forth what a holographic will is. So let's tell
everybody what the movie is.
Yeah, exactly. So the movie is Knives Out. It's now available on Amazon Prime. So easy, if you're a Prime member, you can watch this. This is really, and it had so many good reviews. It had a lot of stars. I was like, oh, this is good. Gotta watch it now.
Packed with celebrities. Like when you look, you're thinking, exactly. Oh my gosh, everybody's here. It's good.
I know. Daniel Craig. He's who is James Bond, right? I forget his name. Bo, I forget his name already, but he's got the thick Kentucky.
Benoit, whatever, the nice Frenchy New Orleans kind of.
Yeah. Very Tennessee or Kentucky or whatever. But anyhow, then there's Chris Evans, who played Captain America. There's Jamie Lee Curtis. My goodness, she looks so different from her, from her 1980s kind of movies. There's Toni Collette, love her. Christopher Plummer, who plays Harlan Thrombey, who is the deceased person, but he does come up in the movie a few times. And there's this actress Ana de Armas, so she's the She's the, I think they keep saying Ecuador, Paraguay. I don't even know where she's allegedly from, but in the movie, she's the nurse and she's taking care of Harlan Thrombey. So Harlan Thrombey, real quick, Harlan Thrombey is this really successful mystery writer, and he has his own publishing company. But one morning, his housekeeper friend finds him right after his 85th birthday at this big party at his house. The housekeeper finds him with his throat slit and the knife is still in his hand. So
say that is a great opening scene, right? I mean, when the camera zoomed in,
I know,
and you get a flavor for where he's living. You can feel it's a very eccentric kind of layered, very intricate kind of situation is going to unravel before us. But I love that opening scene, was really neat.
I know. And the whole thing is, it's like a mystery. It's like a mystery. It's perfect. He's a mystery writer. And of course, the whole thing is like a mystery, right? But of course, when they see this, cops are already say it's suicide. The way they were even talking about how the blood splattered all over the place, it looks like a suicide. There was nobody there, blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, there really were some questions. Somehow this gentleman named, what is his name? Bo? Was that? I forgot his name already. But
something.
Benoit, yes, the guy who is Daniel Craig's character, joins the police, the local sheriff and like the detective in this conversation with all the people, all the family members. So, the big question really was, these two cops come in, they do the investigations, they're trying to make sure they're not missing anything. And it opens the whole film, aside from, of course, the dead person on the couch, it opens up with a conversation with each of his children, or family members, really, because there's the daughter, Linda, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis, with her husband.
Which I have to say, she just looks fantastic. You look at her, it was different look for her. And also character, she's typically, to me, warm, cuddly, fun, easygoing. Here I was like, she's tough,
Oh, she's tough. Yeah. That's a good, I think it fits her. It fits her though. It fits her very well. And then, of course, there's, Don Johnson as Richard. I was like, whoa,
holy moly. Yeah. He acted well too. He was,
I know, exactly.
I wonder how old he is. I mean, I was looking at him and thinking like, he looks really good.
He looks good for his age.
I was watching this with my daughter who loves this movie. And I was telling a little bit of history, each of the characters. And I said, this guy, Don Johnson, he had a popular movie in the 80s. And I kept telling her about Miami Vice. And she was like, what about it? I said, it was these stylish men who were detectives. I said, they were stylish at the time. And wearing fancy cars, not a detective salary. I don't know, maybe I'm like confused of these Ferraris and fast cars. But anyway, you're right. Yeah, he was in it too. And
he was in it. He was the cheating husband. And in this one. But and then of course they had a son named Ransom, who was a really big part of the movie toward the end. Ransom is turns out to be not so nice. But anyhow, then there's Thrombey's son Walt, also, who was also running his publishing company on the side, but he's kind of been fighting with Dad for a while because he wanted to, try to make more money for the publishing company, selling rights to like Netflix or whoever. So that's another person there. There's also a daughter-in-law, because I guess one son had passed away. Daughter-in-law Joni, who's played by Toni Collette, deep into self-help, which is kind of fits her, but she's really helping herself to a lot of his assets, because she's making it seem like, I got to put my kid through college, but really she's like dipping into the till, even though technically a daughter-in-law is not really entitled to it, but the grandchild would be entitled to the estate, right? And then of course there's Marta. Marta is played by Ana de Armas. She is the nurse. She has a little bit of a history with, for immigration purposes, something about her mom had come into the country illegally. And then there's the concern that Marta has to make sure that her mom's not found out, that type of thing. So, but she is the Harlan, the deceased person's most trusted confidant. So what happens here? It's really a really cool story. So anybody who wants to watch this, you have to see it. But from the point of view of Holographic Wills, the important points here Okay, so Thrombey's wealthy, right? Wealthy people should have estate plans, but that's not always the case, right? Even not so wealthy people should have estate plans.
Anybody who has things, anything
Yes,
you worked with, you created, any assets. I mean, for the most part, they lived in a house.
yes.
House was a big issue for Jamie Lee Curtis. Every time they
Oh my
mentioned a
gosh.
house, her eyebrows would rise.
I know.
You know, put something in writing, people. You know,
I
you're right,
know
really.
exactly. Oh, just a house alone. My God, that's enough
Yep.
already right there to do something. But anyhow, Thrombey. So Harlan Thrombey had apparently a week before this 85th birthday, and he had died that night somehow. But a week before his 85th birthday, he contacted his attorney. He said, "I'm changing my will," and he gave the attorney a sealed envelope that was not to be opened until after he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And then, sure enough, at the reading of the will, which happened in the movie, this does not typically happen, but it happened in the movie. So what happened was the lawyer opened it, and in front of everybody, and to his surprise, and to everybody's surprise, everybody was cut out. Everybody in the family was cut out. Everything went to Marta, the nurse.
And it existed to her. It was just so funny,
I know.
how that worked. Oh, and then the anger with all the family members.
And then all of it, from prior to that, everyone was like, "We're going to take care of you." Of course, they felt like, they're doing her a favor because now her employer is gone. They're doing her a favor because, we'll take care of you, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, it's like
she was on the other foot.
I know, exactly. So,
Great.
Yeah, so that, a lot of people get, like, "Oh, can that possibly happen?"
Yeah.
And then another one is the will. I want to point out that, the will was, hadn't even been probated. There wasn't any kind of legal action yet, but, it's there. They knew what the contents of the will are. The court's never really involved. We really haven't gotten to that point yet. But right now, the way the family was handling it was pretty accurate. From a point of view of like just watching what's happening from an outsider's point of view, when a will says, "Oh, everything's going to the nurse," everybody's going to flip out.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that you pointed out is that, they were making kind of a ceremony about the will reading, which is total, to me, theatrics, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Once in a while, we'll get a call from a client and we'll go over what happened. And then they'll say, "And you know what? They didn't even have a will reading." And I'm like, "Yeah, there's no requirement for that. It's just total movie making, that's."
Oh, absolutely.
So, there's no requirement, everyone, to have a reading of the will. I suppose it's nice, it's a little morbid, to be quite honest, but
I know.
It's not a requirement, doesn't happen, I would love, I guess I could see, but in all the movies, they love that formal reading. I mean, when the attorney showed up at the house, he was like, "Well, I'm going to set up." And at first I'm like, "What are you going to set up for?" I'm like,
set up for the reading. Yeah. And here, of course, one of the legal things that they did talk about was how the family wanted the nurse to renounce her inheritance from Harlan Thrombey's estate. So I thought that those were very good points.
Yes.
And let's talk about them really quick. I mean, Chris, here it seems like they were talking about, whether one of the things that they talked about, and I forgot to mention, was that, people were already saying, "Oh, that was not valid." Was he even of sound mind? Oh, was he? Yeah, there was undue influence, things like that. I mean, these are certainly concerns, but once under common law, which is really applicable all over the states, we're talking about when somebody writes a will. Aside from the different procedure, one of the most important things about writing a will is the person who's writing it is of sound mind and is not under any duress to prepare this will.
Really, you're right. And that's one of the big things that they brought up. And what I was impressed about in the movie, what was accurate, that they brought up several popular ways to challenge a will.
Exactly.
Capacity. Is that really the big, did he understand what he was writing and what he was doing? And then the attorney brought up a great answer, saying that if he makes a decision that you don't like or agree or you find unreasonable, has nothing to do with his capacity. It's his wish and it's his choice and his preference. So just because it doesn't jive with you doesn't
Right.
mean it's off the rails, not making sense.
Exactly.
And so that's a big deal. And that's kind of, that's hard to take, right? Because when
Mhm.
you're a family member, you have these expectations of how things laid out. You have an expectations of your relationship. I think, in one sense, they felt like, well, of course he's going to choose us, we're family.
Mhm.
And when it was coming to play where he's just like, I know you're family and I probably don't really like you. And that's how it goes. That really is how it goes. And it's
Right.
his choice, what to
Right.
do. So that's hard. And, in at least in New Jersey, to measure capacity, it's sophisticated enough, but it's not so much off, such a high standard. I'll let you know. I mean, I really feel that, when we meet clients and that we need to just measure to make sure they understand, we really have to make sure they understand who they are, where they are, why we're doing what we're doing, what are the consequences of what your choices are, and when they are able to articulate that, that is a really good basis for having capacity, and it's important to keep notes about that, if there's other people in the room, and just a whole description, because if things come up later, at least you, the attorney, could describe how the appointment came about, what happened during the meeting, who was there, how did they get there,
Mhm.
were they driven, did they drive themselves, things like that. Though every little bit helps. But yeah, I love when the attorney brought that up in the movie about capacity, that yeah, I
Yeah,
know you don't like what he chose, but
exactly.
he chose
But
it.
he chose it,
Yeah,
it just,
I thought that was good. But if I can also just go back, where I felt something was unbelievable, seeing James Bond with a Southern accent, that was very hard. I was like, what? But I felt like, well, James Bond is here, something's wrong, And then he started speaking. I'm like, James Bond is Southern. Anyway,
yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. But it was,
no, but that was good. He did it, near as it went along, I was sold. But in the beginning, I had a hard time looking at Daniel T. Craig, like, wait,
wait, is it
you have an accent and I
it's
know you're
not British.
English. And then at one point when he was speaking to Marta, who's Spanish speaking, he actually used some Spanish. I'm like, oh, now this is off the rails in my head. You're English, speaking with a Southern accent, and then a little bit of Spanish. Oh, what is happening with me? But anyway, back on track. Yeah. So I thought that
Thankfully,
was
I'm not a
good.
James Bond fan, so I didn't have that issue.
Yeah.
You know?
Capacity. The other
Yeah,
thing was undue influence. That's
yes,
another way to challenge your will, undue
yes,
influence, meaning,
absolutely.
right? That was this person being pressured, being persuaded, being
Oh,
manipulated to cut out family and put this person, and that's a legitimate situation. And I'll let you know, in New Jersey,
absolutely.
we've had a couple of cases in our own office about that.
Yeah.
And it is a very fact sensitive types of case. No two cases are the same, and you really have to gather a lot of information of relationships that were formed, why certain decisions were made, and I find those are very emotional cases too, right? Because a lot of
Absolutely.
people, it's hard to accept that
Mhm.
especially in this movie,
Oh my goodness.
he chose her over family. It does happen. It really does. So undue influence. And I'll let you know, here in Jersey, the onus is now on the on the scrivener. The onus is on the side of the people who have created the will and what the will says. And that's really challenging, because you would think it's the other way around. I'm making the allegation that so and so was manipulative and blocked all of us out and changed and made him change the will.
Right.
And you would think, then I have to prove that. Not necessarily in New Jersey.
Yeah.
They have to now show, what did you do to welcome this? If the allegation is like you never showed up and you never participated in family reunions and things like that, what were, some characteristics, what were some facts to show that maybe you tried and they didn't want to go, or some scenario that makes it unreasonable for say dad to have kept welcoming you back into the family. I remember there was a case in New Jersey where there was an allegation by sister that brother manipulated and persuaded dad to cut her out. And when, as the case went on, they realized that she was making false allegations about dad, calling police falsely, slandering his name, just making life very difficult. So at one point it went to court, and the judge indicated that, based on the circumstances, yeah, that sounds like a reasonable issue, decision for dad, saying like, I really, made my life horrible. And that's reasons why I decided to disinherit you. And that's not always the reason, but I can see the train of thought of the court. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, undue influence, that's another way to challenge, the will and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for, just to go back on that holographic will. So, he typed it, looked like a typewritten letter that he had sealed, but it was just very one-sided, right, Chris? It just said,
Right.
I, Harlan, Thromby, I give everything to Marta. And that was kind of like about it. And he listed all his assets.
He lists all his assets. That's important too,
and,
because you have to be aware too of what your assets are. That's like one of those things. If it just says everything to Marta without any kind of listing, it's even easier to challenge that, to say he did not have the capacity. Look, he didn't even know what his assets were. But under common law, that is one of the things that's required in a will, that you have to be
where
aware.
I think they can also, and where I think they can also challenge it is that he doesn't even mention that he has children and that I purposely decide to knock them out. And that's a common reason where people are suspicious about whether a will was done with capacity, where say even he mentions one child, how about the others? It makes you feel like, see, he really didn't even know about us. He forgot about us.
Exactly.
So we have a problem. In real life, I'm sure this will be challenged. The kids will all step up, follow each of the kids. Well, there were 3 kids, I believe, 3 or 2.
Well, there were 4 initially, but wait a minute. No, there were 3 initially, but only 2 were alive at that time.
Okay.
Because, Tony Colette was the daughter-in-law.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So then you have, so I wouldn't be shocked if all of them, the kids hire their own lawyers, all file petitions with the court to have this holographic will thrown out, and they probably will win. I'm just letting you know, just because of how it was.
I think so too. I agree. Absolutely.
I don't know if it was witnessed. I don't know if it was notarized. I'm going to assume not, just because how it was done. But I know it's just a great story. But let's just see how this will play out in real life. So it will definitely be
it's definitely going to be challenged. You're right.
It will be challenged. Yeah. And what the other thing at the end of the movie, you see all of the family members outside the house looking up at Marta with her cup of coffee and her blanket, and she looks so cozy, and she's drinking Harlan from the mug from Harlan that he would use. But technically, it's not her house yet. So none of the assets would be distributed. She's not going to, because they made it sound like she's living and she's going to be camping.
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
And I remember saying to my daughter, that's not really going to happen. She'll still be in her apartment, wherever she was, in downtown, wherever, and this will be battled for years.
Right. Exactly.
And that's the unfortunate. I think though, so just letting everyone know that typically estate contests, there's not much case law out there. And the reason is because these types of cases are very expensive to litigate. So it makes it challenging to find good case law to fit your circumstance, but also finding more clarity in certain statutes is hard. And it's because at certain points in time, both parties agree that this is becoming very emotional, very tolling money-wise. Let's settle. And once that happens, then there's nothing in the books, and it's just settled. So that's something to be mindful with if anyone's thinking of challenging wills. It's a very long process and a very emotional and also very expensive process. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes. But yeah, I thought, I love the movie. I thought it was fun. It's like a living clue board.
I know that was so interesting. And to be honest, it brought up so many good points. And that's how we got so much law out of this technically, because it really gives you an idea of what, how things should be. This is why you need an estate planning attorney to make sure that your interests are really protected. But anyhow, let's talk about.
Wait, one more thing though.
Of course.
Emma, I'll let you know, Emma brought up a good point in this situation where if this was in New Jersey, and because he disinherited his next of kin and gave everything to Marta, first thing my daughter says, 13 years old, she's going to have a big tax bill. That's going to be a big inheritance tax. You're absolutely right.
Very true.
So in New Jersey, we're one of the rare states that have inheritance tax Basically, inheritance tax in New Jersey is based upon bloodline, not necessarily based on how much assets you have, but who's getting it. So if you die and your assets are going to a spouse, a child, a grandchild, a stepchild, their inheritance tax is zero.
Parents too. Parents. Don't forget parents.
Parents, you're right. Inheritance tax is zero. Here, he said, I'm giving to Marta. Well, you know what, Marta, you're not in the series of relationships that are noted in entire tax law in New Jersey. So it's going to be a big hit. It's going to be a big hit for her. Absolutely. It was a $60 million. Again, without careful planning and just simply writing it, they're losing a lot of money. So anyway, so that was a fun thing. I love that. So that was a good thing. So Knives Out, for the most part, entertaining, brought up great arguments, but as for reality's sake, I don't think it really holds water in my head,
Right. Yeah. That will was a little too simple. I mean, I
know. Yeah, exactly. A little too simple. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But you're right. So that is a great segue into where we always like to see things that are happening currently in the news or things that have had happened in the news to bring it more into play. And so I wanted to bring up about Aretha Franklin, the queen of soul. I love her music. I loved everything about her. There's actually a movie going to be coming out about her. She wanted Halle Berry to play her, but I'm hearing it's going to be Jennifer Hudson.
Right.
I think she has the pipes to do that. That's the right choice. But either actress would have been wonderful. But when I heard Jennifer Hudson stepping up, I'm like, oh yeah. I said that would do it.
Perfect.
So let's bring that music to life. So Aretha Franklin, beautiful singer, died in 2018, and at that time, her family was confident she didn't have a will. Right. But lo and behold, they started to find writings, and slowly they started finding things in her handwriting. And they actually found just recently a fourth document, actually 3 handwritten documents that were found tucked between sofa cushions and other papers. And then a fourth one had come up recently, and that was actually typed up by a law firm, but not signed. Very interesting. So prior to them finding the typed up version, the whole idea is this holographic will this be honored? So it was going to be presented to the court in Michigan, and Michigan, they do allow it, but they have their rules. And I'll let you know, I did take a look at this handwritten notes. A little hard to read, you can see it was just all her thoughts. She was talking about copyrights, about her, her books, book deals, things like that in it. But again, this is probably why we should also emphasize good handwriting. God bless you, Aretha Franklin, but that was hard to read, and I get it. It was a copy of a copy of a copy. But, teachers, I get why you're saying we have to have good handwriting, because if this comes up to read that will, it was hard. I was like, whoa, oh my goodness. I didn't even get, because on the top of it, it said A. Franklin, but I didn't even get that. I was like, who's that? Is that even her hand? Oh, that is an A. Okay, that is an A. That's an A. Oh, no. So please, everyone, here's a reason why we need to get better in our handwriting. So otherwise, again, it brings up, she had 3 boys. All of them were now in the process of trying to challenge the will in one way or the other. And actually there was one son with special needs. So that's where we have to see now in that typewritten will, there is mention of creating a special needs trust. But again, it's up to the courts. Are they going to honor any of this? And it's going to be very challenging. And again, one of the things we have to bring up is when someone handwrites something, like in those handwritten, they were actual, like on yellow pad, handwritten. We don't even know, was that her handwriting, number one. And number two, because there's no witnesses, we can't attest to her capacity. We don't know, was she in her right mind when she was putting this all together? In New Jersey, we have what we call self-proving wills. And in it, witnesses would attest to a person's capacity. It used to be that if you're a witness to a will and there's a problem, you're going to have to testify in court to say, yeah, I saw her sign it, or I know that she had right mind when, at the time this occurred. But, we understand that sometimes, witnesses die, are hard to locate. So now we have self-proving wills where there's a statement in there saying that, yes, I'm here. I attest that they're of sound mind, so that at least that's going to be used to say that they had capacity. And of course, what is handwritten, I'm sure we don't have that wording. So that brings up a question. So that's a problem. The other thing I want to bring up too, Chris, is now people may not realize that, wills in itself, whether it's holographic or typed up, it becomes a public document when you die. So that means you can see a lot of things, if you mention assets, if you mention people involved in your life and whatever circumstances you want. And for some clients, that's perfectly fine. But for other clients, it may be sensitive information that we really don't want to broadcast. And in Aretha Franklin or any celebrity, now and especially now we don't even know if we have a will. Everyone is parading through all their assets. It's all public knowledge. We know all of her debt. I mean, at first they thought she had like this 80 million estate, and now it's kind of willowed down to almost 6 million. She had a lot of debt, a lot of issues going on that need to be addressed. And that's hurtful. It's so private why you have to deal with that. So which is why a lot of times people look to other tools such as a revocable trust. That's actually a very simple tool to contemplate if you're worried about privacy in your assets, and it actually works quicker to get things distributed instead of a will. But everyone's different. And in New Jersey, probate in itself is not hard, it's not complicated, it's not even expensive, but it's a process, and your documents and your details of your life become public. Absolutely. But the other thing we should be aware of, if you have no will, be prepared that all your assets are going to be public. All your debts are going to be public, because whoever needs to deal with it, it just becomes, a showcase of what needs to be distributed. So that's touchy. I think that's very hard.
And that's all public record. You have to remember, people have, don't realize, it's not just like at the end of the movie where she stands there on the top of the house and, it looks like it's hers. No, there's still the process to have actually transfer this asset to her. And because of the probate process here in New Jersey, everything is recorded with the courts and everything is public record. Maybe not the Social Security and a death certificate. I've seen that redacted, of course, but who gets what, how much they're going to be receiving. All this information will be accessible in the courts. That's why people need to think about that revocable living trust if they don't want any of this information to be out there. There are ways around it, for sure, with all these different ways of transferring assets. But if you want to be able to retain control of your assets during your lifetime but still have that privacy without having to go to the probate process, that trust is really useful. And people have to understand that there are ways around it. But inheritance tax, just like anything, just like any tax, can't avoid that one. So, but that was great that Emma thought of that. I got to tell you.
I know. I was very proud of her. I just
said the office a lot.
It was just a funny statement where she said, "Well, it's going to be a big tax bill for her." And
we're priming her. We're priming Chris.
I thought that was great. I thought that was fun. But the other thing I was thinking about with Aretha Franklin is that because say they rule that these holographic wills are it doesn't fit the bill. We rather just go by the intestate rules, which is rules of what happens when there's no will. Every state has their set of rules. When you die without a will, there's a set of rules that we have to follow. Absolutely. But what will happen is that whoever steps up to the plate to become what they call administrator, it's also the executor who will be in charge of the estate. They'll have to be bonded. That's more money out of the estate to protect what they're doing and protect any assets that are involved. And that's based upon how much assets you have. And it could be, like I said, what's interesting I read about Aretha is that with all the music that she created, there's only 2 that she owned herself. Everything else was owned. One song was Think, and that was in that movie Blues Brothers.
Yes.
And I forget the other one, but
lots of movies. I love that song.
That was the one that matters. And I thought of all songs, because she wrote that and she owned that, which is great. And that, was top of the charts and things like that. And then, but that's a shame, and because of that, perhaps, there could have been better ways to, utilize, and who knows, maybe the estate now, after, hopefully when things settle, they can do better, just like as all celebrities, after they pass, there's a way to use what they've done and promote it and use it in different ways, so anyway, but yeah, Aretha herself, will have to see, it's still currently playing, right? So she died 2018.
Yeah.
2021.
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah. I mean, even a regular estate in New Jersey, as long as you have, a house and, different types of assets need to be distributed, it's not an overnight process. That's why the trust is always very helpful, like you were talking about, because that really cuts down on a lot of these additional things that have to be done when a will is probated. So yeah, I mean, I think I think these two, the movie plus Aretha's situation really talks well about like how a holographic will might not be the best thing for everybody. Granted, if you don't really have a lot of assets, but the thing is, what you might not think of as a lot of assets is actually significant from the point of view of a probate situation. So it's just good to talk to an attorney. It's just good to talk about whether it's important or not, and whether what you have in place is actually sufficient for what you want to get done. And you want to make sure that the people who are receiving your assets, you don't have to worry about taxes. You don't have to worry about the whole process of people contesting it. It's so important for people to talk to attorneys about that, to make sure that they have their wishes in place.
Yep, exactly. Well, I think this was fun. Another great episode. I hope everyone learned things, and we're always learning too, and seeing how it works in real life. And so, listeners, thank you so much for listening. We had a great time. Tune in for our next episode. We're very excited to bring some more information. And if you have suggestions of movies you'd like us to have commented on, or to take a look at, or something in the news, let us know. You can always email us at admin@mattislaw.com. I'm Christine Mattis.
And I'm Christine Karen Sahagurski. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Look forward to talking to you next week.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.